This session, Family and Finances, best fits in the accumulation stage. There are lots of temptations and pressures to accelerate financial progress, but many of our most difficult coaching sessions are with folks who bit off too much too soon. And while things like buying a home are without a doubt exciting at the start, they can quickly turn into a major source of stress. So taking steps to ensure you're ready for these major life changes can help ensure they bring as much joy to your life as possible. Before you take on something like a mortgage, be sure you've taken steps associated with the financial safety stage, including saving $1,000 in your emergency account with a goal of accumulating 3 months of expenses. Create a spending plan and stick to it. If you have debt, start a debt elimination plan and get started saving in your 401k, especially if your employer offers a match. With these foundational steps complete, you can look ahead to the major financial decisions we'll cover in this session. Let's start with preparing to purchase a home, making sure you start smart. First, do not raid your 401k savings. I have friends who are terrific real estate agents and mortgage brokers, but there are others who aren't even slightly concerned with how a home purchase will affect you. Sometimes they'll recommend you raid your 401k savings, suggesting you're trading one investment for another. But remember, while you can take a loan for a lot of things, the one thing you can't take a loan for is retirement. If you need to raid your retirement in order to buy a home, it's probably not time for you to take on a mortgage. Next, don't spend more than 40% of your paycheck on your mortgage payment. In fact, experts recommend you spend 28% or less. One way to keep that payment down is to save 10 to 20% for your down payment. This helps avoid PMI, or primary mortgage insurance. PMI is something the lender adds to your payment when you don't put enough down in case you represent a credit risk. For some loans, PMI stops when you build enough equity in your home, but for others, the PMI lasts the life of the loan, which can mean plowing a lot more dollars into paying off your mortgage. If you're buying your first home, be sure to check with your agent about programs for first-time home buyers. Finally, and most important, I'll share some advice my dad gave to me when I bought my first home. The mortgage is the smallest of home ownership costs. While our workshop Buying, Renting, and Refinancing covers this topic in more detail, remember that owning a home means you're on the hook for major costs like replacing a leaky roof or a broken air conditioner, as well as smaller costs like getting the furnace serviced before winter sets in and tending to the landscaping. And that certainly doesn't include the money you'll spend on renovations. Remember I mentioned earlier the excitement of buying a home can quickly turn into stress and burden. This is why. And the more you stretch yourself to cover the mortgage, the less you'll have to cover those other expenses. All that to say, while it's true a home is an investment, it is also an obligation. Buy a home because you're ready, not because you've been convinced that renting is throwing money out the window. Another major change is the decision to join your life with another. And like buying a house, there's a lot of excitement in the beginning, but as marriage unfolds, you'll need to figure out how to compromise, problem solve, and handle stress together. A major source of stress in relationships is money, so talk about it before you get married. Although it's not a particularly easy or enjoyable topic of conversation, if you can't talk about it before you marry, you might find it next to impossible to manage finances together after you've tied the knot. Be sure you know each other's income and credit scores. Be honest about the amount of debt you have and make plans together for eliminating it. Also, be honest about your spending habits. Are you an impulsive spender or a miser? Talk about your financial goals too. Discuss your individual goals, big and small, and set goals as a couple. 94% of couples who rated their marriage as great in a Dave Ramsey survey said they talk about money goals regularly. Be honest about where you're starting. In fact, it might be good to consult the financial needs hierarchy together. You might find you're in similar spots, or you might be in very different places. But don't be surprised or deterred. Just be committed to making decisions together, keeping each other on track, and celebrating successes and milestones along the way. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the most expensive line item in your budget. Just kidding. Being a mom is my favorite job, but that doesn't mean it's easy or cheap. When you're getting ready for baby, be sure you understand your health insurance coverage. If you have an HSA, try saving as much as you can. The dollars you contribute are tax deductible, and the interest you earn, even if only a small amount, is not taxed when you withdraw it to pay for healthcare expenses like having a baby. Also, if your employer offers a flexible spending account, remember many of the items you might buy, like baby monitors, nursing equipment, baby thermometers, are eligible purchases. Next, beware the baby registry. When I had my first child, I lived in an 800 square foot row home. When I went to the baby store to create a registry, I left in tears. I knew my tiny house was not possibly big enough for all the stuff the sales lady insisted I needed to bring my son home. By the time my daughter arrived, I learned that there's really actually quite little you need to bring that baby home. Stay focused on essentials. And check with other new parents that might be a stage ahead of you. Most are happy to lend you the bouncy chair they used for about 4 months before baby had tired of it. Also, now's the time to really build up your emergency savings, especially if you'll be off work with reduced or no pay. Having a baby highlights new priorities. Things like life insurance take on new meaning as your family grows. Now's a good time to consider a little extra coverage. Also review your spending plan since you'll have new budget items to add for baby. Finally, if you and your partner will be working, plan ahead for childcare. Many facilities have a waiting list, so don't wait until it's time to return to work to start searching. Also, childcare is very expensive, maybe even costing more than your mortgage. Be sure you're considering this new cost in your spending plan. When you have a new baby, it seems like all you hear is, "Enjoy this time, it goes so fast." And as a parent myself, I can say that is most definitely true. I know it's hard to believe when you haven't slept through the night in 9 months, but in the blink of an eye, you'll be planning a high school graduation party. And while we believe college is not for everyone, odds are your child will need some type of post-secondary education or training. In fact, before you start your college visits, be sure to do some career exploration. There are an endless number of trade and technical careers out there that offer better wages and far less debt than many jobs that require a 4-year degree. Investing in education is an investment like any other. Make sure the jobs your child is interested in are worth the cost of getting that diploma. But regardless of the type of post-secondary education or training your child pursues, one of the most tax-advantaged ways to save is in a 529 plan. These state-sponsored accounts often have tax benefits for saving and are used tax-free to pay for higher education expenses. Another great thing is that anyone can contribute, so you might want to encourage Grandma and Grandpa to add some dollars to baby's 529 plan instead of bringing a new stuffed animal every time they come to visit. We go into this in more detail in our education planning workshop. With all these big changes, the cost of experiencing the unexpected grows. From a medical emergency to a car accident, the consequences of being unable to work or worse, losing a spouse, are much higher now. As your financial situation changes and your family grows, it's a good idea to review your insurance coverages. When you're single with few responsibilities, your insurance needs are pretty minimal. But as your situation changes, your insurance needs increase. As children leave home and mortgages are paid off, insurance needs might actually decrease. All this to say, managing your insurance plan is a dynamic process. It's something you should review regularly. There are many different types of life insurance. Depending on your need, one might be better than the other. Some policies, like term, provide coverage for a fixed period of time, which is great when it comes to planning for college costs or to cover a mortgage. But permanent coverage, like variable, universal, and whole life, are best for insurance needs that don't have an expiration date, things like funeral costs or estate planning. Another important type of coverage is disability insurance. As you merge your life and finances with someone else's, your ability to work takes on more importance. Policies are very different, so be sure to understand when your policy will pay. In other words, how long must you be disabled before benefits start? Also, how much will it pay and for how long? Finally, insurance carriers want you to return to work, but each policy has a different way of determining whether you can work. Some consider you disabled if you are not able to perform the duties of your own occupation. Others will only continue paying if you're unable to perform the duties of any occupation. Our Insurance 101 workshop takes a deep dive into disability insurance. Finally, time to consider what would happen to your family if something happened to you. Be sure you have your basic estate planning ducks in a row. If you haven't done so already, it's time to prepare your estate documents, including your last will and testament. Some of the primary details contained in this document are instructions for the disposition of your assets and accounts that do not have a beneficiary designation or joint owner. You will also name key people like your executor, who's the person responsible for carrying out your wishes and executing the associated legal and financial tasks. Finally, if you have children, you'll need to name guardians. Think carefully about the person or persons you name for these roles. You should talk to them first to be sure they're up for the task. Another key legal document is the power of attorney designation. A POA is a person you authorize to act on your behalf in the event of a physical or mental disability. It's important to note that the POA is valid as long as you are living. Upon your death, your will takes over along with your executor. Some lawyers allow you to make specific designations for the person responsible for your medical affairs separate from your financial affairs, while other attorneys simply combine these roles in a general power of attorney. A living will is a legal document that describes your wishes as it relates to life-sustaining measures you do or do not want to employ when your condition or illness is terminal or you are permanently unconscious. The living will also describes your preferences for pain control measures and organ donation. Finally, especially if you have young children, you might consider establishing a trust within your legal documents. In many states, children under a specific age, 18 for example in Pennsylvania, are not able to inherit assets. So if something happens to you before your children reach that age, your assets may not be accessible unless you establish a trust within your last will and testament. These types of trusts define rules for how money can be spent while your children are underage. For example, to pay for their basic needs, education, housing, clothing. Then you can restrict the designation of remaining funds to specific ages. For example, you might pay 25% of remaining assets to each child upon attainment of age 25, 30, 35, and 40. This allows their financial decision-making to mature and avoids decisions they might regret later. You will need to name a trustee to oversee the trust and to ensure the rules established within your documents are followed. We recommend a person or institution other than the guardian for this role in order to keep parenting and financial authorities separate. Last but not least, whether it's marriage or children, as your life situation changes, be sure to revisit your beneficiary designations. Your last will and testament provides the disposition of your personal property and things like bank accounts that do not have named beneficiaries. For 401ks, IRAs, life insurance, etc., you name beneficiaries. So keep in mind that updating your will does not impact beneficiary designations and vice versa. The good news is that beneficiary record keeping for most company retirement plans is online, which makes it easy to check and change your choices. In the case of marriage, many states consider retirement accounts to be marital assets. That means naming anyone other than your spouse as the sole primary beneficiary requires your spouse's notarized signature. So if you have children from a previous relationship, for example, and you want to divide your beneficiaries between those children and your current spouse, that's not a problem. You'll just need to have your spouse sign off to be sure your wishes are executed as you desire. Occasionally, we see someone list last will and testament as their beneficiary. We strongly discourage this. Your will cannot actually inherit anything. In most cases, this will result in your 401k being cashed out and paid into your estate. If you have outstanding debts, your 401k might go to creditors instead of your loved ones. So we recommend naming a person or persons as your beneficiaries. The exception to this rule are trusts. For example, if you establish a children's trust that we just talked about, you may want to list your beneficiary as the trust established in my last will and testament. Okay, we covered a lot of ground in this session. In most cases, we just skimmed the surface of important topics. To learn more about the topics most relevant to your situation, explore the MyMoneyNav dashboard or visit moneynav.com. So as we wrap up, let's run through the key items we covered. First, make sure you've completed the essential steps in the financial safety stage. Next, don't buy a house too soon. Be sure you're ready for the costs associated with this lifestyle decision. While your first goal was to save $1,000 in your emergency savings account, as you think about buying a home or starting a family, shoot to accrue 3 months of your living expenses in your emergency account. And make sure you plan ahead for children and education. These light items will change your spending plan and your budget. Make sure you're ready to take on these additional costs. Also, as your situation changes, so too do your insurance needs. It's probably a good time to check with an agent to make sure you have adequate coverage. And prepare your estate documents. If the worst happens to you, this is the best way to care for your loved ones. And last but not least, be sure your beneficiaries are an accurate reflection of your current situation. Financial wellness is a journey of 1,000 miles. You can't do it all at once, so just focus on the best next step. A great next step is to complete your MoneyNav assessment. This questionnaire takes about 5 minutes and results in a series of personalized to-dos or best next steps that are built right into your MyMoneyNav dashboard. For an assessment link, email your financial coach at moneynav.com.